In this video, I'm going to teach you how to make a riveted band ring. It's really important to sketch lots of different ideas, not just one, but many ideas. Fill your sketchbook. I've picked this one. You'll notice there's a focal point for the top of the finger and then the band for around the finger. I'm making a size 8 ring, which is 2 5/16 length. Refer to the chart in the back of the room. I cut a piece of paper 2 5/16 long, but I will have to make it slightly shorter to account for the focal point on the top of my finger. I've cut my metal. Here I'm using sterling silver, and you'll notice that my focal point actually has holes in it. I'm using 14 gauge holes for 14 gauge silver tube wire. Take a ring mandrel and put your band on the mandrel, push it around with your finger, and then take a mallet and hammer it around until it's the correct size. Here you'll notice I'm going on an size 8 for my band. It won't touch perfectly like a circle because remember, we've taken off a slight bit amount to make room for the focal point. The pendant, let's call it, that'll rest on the finger. So now that I've put my band on the ring mandrel, I'm going to put the part of the metal for the focal point of the ring on the mandrel as well and hit it with a mallet. Again, you'll notice that this part of the ring has holes drilled in it. I'm going to use the 2 holes on the side that I did 14 gauge holes for the rivet to connect to the band. So now I have my ring, the band, and the top of the ring, the focal point. I'll line them up to make sure they fit and they're rounded to the size on the mandrel that I want. And notice that it overlaps, the focal point overlaps the band because I'm going to need to drill a hole on the band on each side for the rivet. I need to make sure my metal is wide enough and thick enough that I can drill a hole on the ends of the band. And there's enough metal around where the hole will be so the hole doesn't accidentally, get too close to the edge of my metal. So again, I'm lining up the pendant or the focal point of the ring on top of the band and make sure that I have enough space to drill holes on the band. You can see that they overlap with enough space. I'm going to take a really thin Sharpie and I'm going to poke through the holes of my focal point piece to the band. I'm going to drill only one hole at a time and then rivet and then drill the second hole. So I'm taking masking tape and I'm taping down the band on the wooden finger. And then I'm going to make a dent. I'm going to use some teamwork here and ask a friend, as I hold the awl where I want the dent to go, if they could take the hammer and dent for me. Now I'll take it to the drill press, make sure my goggles are on, and make sure I have the right size drill bit. Remember, I'm using 14 gauge sterling silver tubing, so I need to make sure my drill bit matches that size. So it's a 14 gauge hole. Take off the tape. I drilled my hole through the end of my band. And now I'm going to take the sterling silver tubing and I'm going to slide it through the hole of my focal point piece and through the hole on the end of my band. If I was using wire, I would use 16 gauge wire. Tubing's a little harder because I've got to take my jeweler's saw and while it's through the holes, use my jeweler's saw to cut through the tubing. You can't snip it with a scissors or a wire cutter because you'll close the hole. This seems to be the hardest part for me, is actually cutting it with the jeweler's saw. Now I cut it, and you can see the tubing is through both holes, the band and the focal point piece. And now I'm going to take it on to the ring mandrel and take my flat file, and I need to file the ends of my tubing flat because now I'm going to make the rivet. Now you'll notice I'm drilling the holes and I'm going to rivet while the piece is formed already in the shape of a ring. If I riveted this flat and then formed the ring, the rivet would most likely snap. So you need to form the ring first and then do the rivet. So I filed both ends flat and make sure that I have the correct amount of metal sticking out of each end of the hole. You only need a little bit sticking out. I'm going to put it on the ring mandrel then, and with my awl, I'm going to put the awl in the hole and gently tap it with a hammer. This is spreading out the end of the hole of the tubing. And I'm going to take my awl, you can see, and move it around a little bit to make sure that the rim is spreading out. And I'm going to rivet on the ring mandrel. Now as I tap gently on the outside of the ring with the ball end of the ball peen hammer, the inside, the tubing on the inside of the ring is getting riveted against the steel mandrel. So starting with the ball end, I start to spread out the tubing and then take the flat end of the ball peen hammer and tap, tap, tap away. Like I said, the inside of the tubing on the inside of the ring is getting hit against the steel mandrel, and the rivet is being made on the inside as I tap the rivet on the outside. Once the tube rivet is done on one side, I'm going to take the mallet and reshape the ring on the mandrel to make sure that the metal for the focal point lines up with the band on the other side. Once I make sure that it lines up, I'm going to take it back to the drill press, put it on the wooden finger. This time I don't need to tape it down. Just make sure that I'm securely holding it. Line up my drill bit with the press and make my drill hole. So now I've got the hole ready on the second side of the band. Again, fit the tubing through both holes. Take it to the V block with my jeweler's saw and I will saw off the tubing. Again, this is the hardest part for me. Saw it off. You can see the tubing is stuck in the hole, and while it's still in the hole, I'm going to file both sides flat. Whenever you make a rivet, you want to make sure the ends of the wire or the tubing are perfectly flat before you start to hit it with a hammer. Now since it's a tube rivet, the extra step here is to take the awl, remember, tap it gently with the hammer, and move it around to stretch out the end of the tubing. Then I'll take the ball end of my hammer and gently tap, 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 tap it. Now I want to make sure, I don't think I said this before, that the wire or the tubing isn't perfectly flush against the mandrel right now. I'm leaving a little bit of space between the ring and the mandrel as I tap the tube on the outside, because that will allow enough tubing or wire on the inside of the ring to create a rivet. If you keep it perfectly flush, you're just riveting the outside, and the inside is flat, kind of like not enough metal sticking out to make an actual rivet. Refer to the diagram in your packet. Now I finished the rivet on the other side, and now I'm reshaping it with the mandrel. While riveting, sometimes your hammer accidentally slips and you might make a dent in your metal, in your ring. So I can take it to the flex shaft now and resand. I did sand my metal all perfect before I started riveting, but I'm just going to clean it up a little bit with 220 with any deep hits from the hammer, and then 600. I'm going to sand the outside and the inside. After sanding with 220 and then 600 on the flex shaft, I'm set to polish. You can see my tube rivets are flush with the metal, and they look really good, inside and outside. Now I'll take it to the polishing wheel, making sure I'm wearing my goggles and mask. You'll notice I have the ring on a wooden finger. Hold both ends of the wooden finger. That's very important when you're polishing. If you're only holding the wide end and not the thin end, the ring could fly right off. Then I'm going to polish my metal. Make sure the vent is open. Again, goggles and mask are very important when on the polishing wheel. Now let's take a look at the ring. All shined up and perfect. Let's take a look at some other rings that have been done in class. using rivets to connect a focal point, a piece of metal on the top for your finger, with a band.